Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Plan, Your Part, a podcast where our goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, seeking to understand God's plan of redemption while discovering daily and practically your part in it.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to God's Plan, Your Part. I'm excited to talk about these verses. We are reading through Jeremiah 41 to 45, and I think what could be at the heart of these verses for you today is if you have ever committed to change your path or change the way you're doing your life and you've come up against challenges. Like you decide, you know what, I'm not going to live that way anymore. I'm going to live a life that honors God. Surely you've come up against challenges. Like Satan does not just let that go unchecked. And so I think at the heart of the text today, we're seeing people who come to seek the Lord. They kind of weigh the cost and they decide just to go back to doing what they were doing before. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting to unpack. So as we unpack those things, I'm just interested in looking at some of those themes and some of those elements in Jeremiah 41 to 45.
So we're seeing a lot of that in chapter 44. So there's this comment that keeps coming up about giving offerings, drink offerings, and making cakes to the Queen of Heaven. And what's interesting, I've heard of this god before. So this god would have likely been referring to Ishtar, which is a fertility goddess. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming is that an Egyptian thing? I don't actually know.
I think it's a Babylonian thing.
Oh, Babylonian thing. Well,
I don't know that for sure.
Either way, these people were very comfortable making these offerings to her. And in the text in chapter 44 specifically and in verse 17, it says, let's see. But we will do everything that we have vowed, make offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pour out drink offerings for her as we did, both we and our fathers, our kings and our officials in the cities of Judah. Skipping a little bit further, it says, here we go. For then we had plenty of food, and we prospered, and we saw no disaster. But since we left off making offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. So it's kind of this complaint of hey, when we were offering and making offerings, whatever, to this false god, this Queen of Heaven, we were so much better off. And as soon as we stopped, now we're dealing with famine and being killed and basically being uncomfortable.
What's kind of interesting is the context of that quote. So that is indeed what's happening. The people are like, well, our lives are really good until we stopped offering sacrifices to this fertility goddess. The context of the story is wild. If you look at chapter 41, there's this guy Gedaliah, who we've read about before, but Gedaliah is the person who was appointed governor by Nebuchadnezzar when the Babylonians carried the people into exile. So Gedaliah is like Nebuchadnezzar's appointed leader in the land that he controls, and Gedaliah is over the remnant, the people that are left in Judah. And so there is this revolt that rises up against Gedaliah. Ishmael brings an army and kills off Gedaliah and all his people because they don't want to serve the Babylonians, and that is not what God had said. God said that they should remain there. Mm-hmm. And so there is this little bit of civil unrest in that Gedaliah is being killed off. His officials are being killed off. They take a group of sojourners hostage, basically. There's this group of men that show up that are most likely pilgrims for the Feast of Booths, and they take them all hostage. It's kind of this really hostile piece in the chapter. And what happens is this tiny little remnant of people come to Jeremiah and they say, Jeremiah, we've seen the error of our ways. We want to hear the Lord. Would you please pray to the Lord for us? Whatever the Lord tells you to do, we will do it. Mm-hmm. And so Jeremiah takes 10 days. He hears from the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord is, do not go to Egypt. We don't even know that they were intending to go to Egypt, but obviously they were, because right away they're like, you're a liar. We want to go to Egypt.
Yeah. It's kind of that a couple of days ago we talked about denial. When you hear something that you don't want to hear, it's just well, that can't be it because that's not what I want.
Yeah, the context is really interesting because these people have seen a lot. They've gone through a lot. There has been a lot of war. There's been a lot of violence. There's been a lot of hunger. So they are going through a lot, and they fall on their knees in front of God, basically. And they're like, please, just talk to God. Whatever he says, we will do because we're ready. And when God says, don't go to Egypt, they're like, oh, never mind. I want what I want.
Not that, yeah.
And I think it's so interesting. Obviously, we're not in the same situation. Like, obviously, we're not going through what was happening in Jeremiah's day. But surely you know of times where you have committed to change the course and the path of your life. And you have experienced the temptation to go back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening here. The people are kind of falsely proclaiming that they want to serve God. And as soon as it like mildly bothers them, they're like, no, never mind, I'm going back.
I think what's crazy too is like these people had, and I don't know, maybe it's hard because would I believe someone today? I don't know. But they have these prophets of the Lord just like telling them to their faces what the Lord had said after they asked them to tell them. And they just immediately reject and turn away.
Oh, there's been plenty of times that people say something to me where it's like, hey, I was praying for you the other day and I got like this strong feeling that maybe the Lord wants you to hear this. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's just so weird. I don't know. It's a hard place to be because at the same time too, like these people, I would not say are necessarily seeking the Lord's direction and call in their life as I think you would be. So I don't know if that's fair.
It's interesting because on the surface, they are declaring that they want to know God's will for their lives. But as soon as God reveals something that is against their own nature, they're not into it. And so I think for us today, it's to remember like when we yield to God's plan and purpose in our lives, we have to continually yield to his purpose and plan in our lives, because sometimes God does ask us to do things that make us uncomfortable. Sometimes God asks us to do things that kind of put us in a strange spot. And it is obedience that he's looking for.
Yeah. And that is very hard to do because I think there are so many comforts and so many things that keep us doing what we're doing or where we are because it's just what's easy. It's what's, I don't know, accessible. And it's really hard to turn from whatever said thing is as an act of faith of what you know the Lord is putting on your heart to do. And that can be very challenging. I know, like, for me, like a silly, dumb thing, like, I am constantly trying to, like, do better for our family in, like, a nutritional way. And it's, like, such a dumb thing, but it's a real thing. What is easy is much, like, more convenient to just, well, whatever, we'll just have this instead, and I know it's not good for us or whatever. And that's like a very small kind of pathetic example, but like there's also steps in faith too, of like, you know, we knew that just recently God was like asking us to step in a different direction in our lives. We were in a very comfortable situation of work and church and a lot of things, and it was very hard to be like, okay, God, you know, we'll just do what you say. So there's a lot of things like within daily decisions, like I was just talking, or even like major life altering decisions. Like I would have said like 6 months ago, I would never see us where we are right now, like not once. And if I would have known this is where we were going to be, I would have probably freaked out. Like, wait, what? That changes everything. So those changes are hard to just be like, oh yeah, sure, God, let's just do it. Maybe that speaks to my faith a little bit. Maybe I need to be more comfortable with just being like, okay.
Well, I think it speaks to the common challenge that all of us face. Like as soon as our comfort is challenged, you know, nobody likes to be uncomfortable. Yeah. And the culture for these folks that are in these chapters, like they were very used to offering sacrifices to this God of the heavens. They were very used to falling into this idolatrous practice because there's a rhythm to it, there's a nature to it. On top of it, they believed that those gods and goddesses were giving them prosperity. And so to serve God meant, like to serve the real true God meant that they had to give up their prosperity. They were not willing to do that. And I think that there are many parallels to that today, that if you choose to start to serve the Lord, you know, maybe in a sense of like you're a new Christian, what does it look like for you to start to serve the Lord with your decisions? Like that's a big shift. You start to move away from the things you used to do and the people that you used to hang out with and the things that you used to say. But even as God continues to call us into deeper and deeper obedience, you change your nature and your habits and your patterns, and you do things that are a little bit different. I know for us, like the current challenge for us right now is like we've chosen to homeschool our kids, and that is a little bit weird. And when
especially for me, oh my word,
when you describe that to people, you get looks that are like, huh, that's a little bit weird. But we want to take very seriously, like, discipling our own kids. We want to raise up our children to be godly people who love the Lord. We just don't think that the public school system is going to do that for us. And so we've made a pretty uncomfortable decision. And we're trusting the Lord to work in that decision. And it's made our lives a little bit more complicated. It's made Jenny's life specifically more complicated. So that is what that looks like for us. And I'm not saying that in any kind of way that it makes us more righteous than you or more holy than you. I'm just trying to think of like real world examples, because sometimes we're not very good at being open with those things, of what it looks like to obey the Lord with your family, obey the Lord with your life. I don't think that all of you are supposed to homeschool your kids. I just think that that's what God's put on our hearts, and we want to be faithful to that. So I think there's some pretty real world parallels here, and some good lessons to take away from it. So I'm just challenging you, like, if there is something the Lord's been put on your heart, and it does have a challenge, and it does seem like it'll be a little bit more difficult, then, meet that challenge head on. Don't run to Egypt, where it will be more comfortable and a little bit more easy. Always run to God, so that you are honoring Him, that you are trusting in Him. I think about yesterday, that Habakkuk passage that was, even when I look out and everything is missing and everything is gone and everything looks bleak and dark and challenging, I will have faith in God, because I know God is real and I know God is present in my life. So I will serve Him regardless. And that's what I'm challenging you to do today. So we'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplанyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.